Hello everyone. Sorry I was gone for a bit. I got unwell again because I have the immune system of a rock. In my time off, I did get a tattoo done which is looking pretty cool. It's halfway done now. I was going to ask, what narrators would you like to see me work and collaborate with next? And what type of videos would you like us to cover? And with that, let's get into the video. When I was 19, I was a venture scout, sort of like Boy Scouts, only for older kids, and it's gender mixed. I decided to go to this week-long mixed scouting crew camping trip with a friend of mine. But a few days before going, my friends from the venture scouts bailed, so I'd be going up to the mountains alone, with a bunch of strangers. It's not a big deal for me. I handle myself well. When I got there, I was the only venture scout and the only girl. It's a little awkward, but most of the Boy Scouts were nice and easy to get along with. Although they weren't used to camping with a girl, they happily accepted me as one of the guys. But there was this one guy, Danny. From the first day of camp, he couldn't take his eyes off me. He'd just stare at me. It was a little uncomfortable, yeah, but I figured he was just socially awkward around girls or something, and tried to pay no mind to him. The next day, while we were hiking, we split into pairs, and guess who I turned out with? Danny. He looked a little too excited at the idea of hiking alone with me. His eyes were wide, crazy looking, but he was small, bad hair, 5'6" or so. I figured that I'd be able to take him on if he even tried to fight me, he was that small. So I didn't raise a fuss about it. Before setting out to the hike, he would keep on asking me if I needed help putting on my sun cream. Even though I kept declining, he kept on pushing the question and trying to put sun cream on in the middle of the daytime until one guy made him cut it out. While we were hiking together, he kept probing me. "How old are you?" "Almost 20, I'd reply. "Don't lie. You must be 14 or something. You're innocent. Young innocent girls are always the cutest." He kept on asking innocent enough questions. Where I lived, if I had siblings, what my favourite colour was. Then he began asking me very weird sexual questions which made me feel very uncomfortable. I was freaking out a little but kept my cool. I couldn't show any distress, any chinks in my armour, as I knew that he'd probably get off on that. The only thing I could do was say, "What the hell?" as I kept my eyes fixated on the path ahead. Then he would constantly compliment my skin. "You don't see a lot of girls with pale skin. Do you use moisturiser? Your skin's really pale," he'd ask, attempting to touch my hand, but I kept my arm close to me, held fast to my backpack. I was incredibly tense. Every muscle in my body was screaming now. I sorely regretted wearing a tank top, as I could feel his eyes on me. He started telling me how pale beautiful skin is and how it was so white, since you can see the rope burns and the bruises better. That would send chills down my spine and made me anxious to my stomach. He said then about how he fantasized about sexually assaulting people. I was in disbelief. I kept on gazing at the path ahead. He was constantly smiling, doing a creepy childish kind of smile that really upset me. I just kept silent and quickened my pace. He felt way too close, far too close. I wanted to run. He could probably see the fear in me at this point. There was no hiding it. But then, I saw another pair of scouts that were up ahead. I ran to them, telling them that the four of us should be a group. They declined at first, saying, that we're supposed to be going in twos, but upon seeing how distressed I was, they changed their mind, looking confusedly at Danny, who silently was glaring at them. I was just glad that somebody else was there other than Danny. The four of us went up the mountain. I tried to keep close to the other guys as much as possible and as far from Danny. Upon reaching the end of the trail and regrouping with the others, the two Boy Scouts offered to switch up partners to descend the mountain. Danny looked downright upset, angry even. He was looking at me as though I'd betrayed him, but I didn't care. I accepted the offer and was able to get back to the camp in relative peace and normality. On the way down, the Boy Scout I was with asked me if Danny was bothering me or something. I lied though. I said he wasn't bothering me too much. After all, I was 19. I thought it would be pathetic to get stressed out about a 15-year-old kid. I figured that as long as I was with the other boys, I'd be fine. But then, that night, I was alone in my tent. Everybody else got to sleep in pairs of 2 or 3, but I was the only girl. I had to be alone in my tent. It's always a little creepy being alone and isolated in the forest, away from everyone. The scoutmasters insisted my tent be far away from the boys. I was in a vulnerable, isolated position as a result. I was panicking and was slowly drifting off to sleep, but late at night, I heard rustling outside. I figured it was just a deer or elk. It's usually just that. I told myself not to worry and went back to sleep. But then I heard the tent opening. Opening my eyes, I peeked through the crack in my sleeping bag to see what it was. And there I saw the white of an eye looking back at me. While looking through the small opening of my tent, I saw Danny staring at me. I froze, held my breath. I held my dad's hunting knife close to me, hiding in my sleeping bag, not moving a muscle, staring Danny down, pretending to be asleep, ready to fight at any moment. Should he take one step into my tent, I'd be ready. But he never did anything. He just stared at me, watching, breathing heavily and muttering incoherently to himself. "You there?" I thought I could hear him say. Eventually, after what seemed to be an hour, he left. The next morning, exhausted, I caught naps when I could and if I could, and kept close to the other scouts. It was difficult to maintain my calm and cool composure. The scout leaders were frustrated with me since I wasn't paying much attention to their instructions. I didn't care now. I was always on some level of alert, as Danny would creep up on me and try and caress my neck or play with my hair. Every night, Danny was there, watching. One night, he went digging through my backpack looking for something. Unfortunately for him, I kept all my clothes and personals tucked away with me. In the end, he left with nothing. I grew up in a rough situation and some bad circumstances, so I always felt that I could really rely on myself. Asking for help was never an option. Asking for help meant you were weak, so it hardly ever occurred to me. I was prepared to tough out the rest of the week, but a little over halfway through the week, Danny was called away by the scouts and sent home. I got the feeling that the Boy Scout that helped me before saw what he was doing and complained to the staff, as while everyone was confused and happily saying bye, he just crossed his arms firmly and stared as Danny left. Danny looked so bewildered and confused, like he didn't understand why. It was so strange. I tried my best to forget about it, and the rest of the week went off without a hitch, but the more I think back on it, the more I realise how damn weird and bizarre that kid was. I fear that he may have ended up being a sexual predator or something like that. All I know for certain is that he was very, very disturbed, and that I'm lucky that him targeting me didn't go on any longer. This happened over a decade ago, somewhere in northern Michigan during the summer. My friend Kathy, 18, and my boyfriend's half-sister, Meh, 16, and I, 17, drove down from our hometown to visit friends. And we're on our way back home in Kathy's little Geo. It had lots of engine problems, like overheating, ignition problems, and was constantly falling apart. More than once, it had stalled or just stopped working in the middle of the street while trying to get somewhere. But Kathy thought we'd have to finish since we'd already started. It's a little past midnight and we're roughly an hour away from home. There's nobody on the road, dense woods on every side, no streetlights, no moon. I can barely see past the windscreen because I have a form of albinism, which means that I'm legally blind in my left eye and have really awful vision in my right. My depth perception is terrible. I can't see more than a few feet ahead of me at most, but I usually can make out lights of other cars passing. Sometimes I can make out street lights. Now we drove down this narrow, hilly road. On the descent down the hill, the Geo makes a strange sound. Kathy starts braking, and we get to the bottom of the hill. The car quits working. Kathy swears and turns on the hazards. She and I get out of the vehicle, and I help pop the hood, which causes a bunch of smoke to fly out. After the smoke clears, she tries to figure out what went wrong. We stood in the dark for at least 45 minutes, maybe more, before we realised that we couldn't fix the car and needed a tow truck. These were the days of printouts and brick phones, so we couldn't whip out our smartphone to call the closest tow truck. I decided to call my boyfriend, Caleb, to come and pick us up. We said to bring a tow truck and pick up the Geo when it's daylight. Kathy agreed, so I took out my Nokia and called my boyfriend. I then realised that there's no service. I then asked Kathy and Meh if either of them had service. They both checked their phones and shake their heads. Meh's getting a bit panicky, and we each held up our phones trying to get a signal to no avail. It's really hot, and after failing to get any kind of service, we're all feeling a bit spooked and uncomfortable. Meh begins to do something because she's afraid. Kathy attempts to calm her down, and I wonder if I go through the woods and hills, maybe I can get some reception. I tell them that they have to wait by the car, and I walk away from them up the hill. I get up there, no signal. I walk further and further away until I reach the top of the hill. I can't see either of them anymore. Even at the top of the hill, I don't get a signal. I know there's gotta be trees in the way, so I decided to climb up the tree just to see if it would work. In hindsight, this was not my brightest idea, but with me being an idiot, I went towards a tree and began to climb up. At this point, I just wanted to go home. This is the only thing on my mind. I find a nice one with low branches and decide to climb up this. I climb the branches higher and higher, and I'm about midway up the tree. I feel my pack of cigarettes fall out of my shorts pocket. I'm kind of annoyed, but I figure I can just look for it when I climb back down. I take my phone out and hold it up. I had service. Relieved, I called out Caleb, but he doesn't answer, so I try again until he does. He answers in a sleepy and annoyed voice, but I'm having none of that and simply explaining our situation. He says, "Where are we?" and I give the name of my road and my best guess as to how far along we carry on here. He says that he'll be on his way and tells me to go back and wait for Meh and Kathy, then yells at me for being so stupid to climb up a tree in the dark with my bad depth perception. I said I'm gonna be fine, and we hang up. I start climbing down the tree, but my hand touches a big glob of sap, so I stop and try and wipe it off my shirt. I'm already sweaty and gross, so I'm not too happy about the sap. I'm now failing to get this sap off my hands, and I hear the strangest sound below me. I completely freeze, not being able to place what the hell the sound is. I hear it's moving pretty fast. I stare down into complete darkness below, but I can't see anything. Just hear this noise continuing. It comes closer and closer, and then I hear it right below my tree. Then it stops, right under my tree. I hold on to the branches as tight as I can and wait. I hear leaves shuffling and twigs snapping. After a while, it stops, and the weird noises start again, but it's heading away from me, deeper into the woods. I wait until I can no longer hear the sound, then finish climbing down and jump out of the tree. It's completely silent now because the sounds of the woods. So I grope around on this ground to find my cigarettes. I don't find them, so I make my way out of the woods and back towards the road. I jog to the hill. When I reach the bottom, I notice Meh and Kathy are no longer standing by the car with the hazards on. I walk over to the car, and Meh rolls down the window a little bit and says in a panicked voice, "Elizabeth, where the hell were you?" I then look over my shoulder and point towards the hill and start to explain that I can hear something. But Kathy yelled, "What the hell were you doing? Get back in the car." I give them a weird look, but Meh unlocks the door and I crawl towards the back seat, slamming it behind me. Kathy slams the locks and double checks them while Meh rolls up the window, making sure the rest are rolled up. One of the windows is never closed all the way, but there's always less than a finger's space, so it's not a big deal. But Meh is freaking out, and Kathy has lost her cool as well. I am still confused and ask what the hell is going on. Meh tells me that a bit after I went up the hill, some weird person come out of the woods, and that he ran really funny up the hill in the direction that I went. That got me freaked out, and they said that they turned off the lights. They thought that he had got me. I am honestly scared at this point, because if I hadn't have stopped to wipe the sap off my hands, I would likely have gotten off just in time to encounter the man. I just knew it as the same person. I tell them the story. Everybody in the car is terrified, but relieved that Caleb is on his way. We only have to play the waiting game now. We all sit in the car for what feels like forever. The sense of dread does not leave us. Kathy and Meh are looking out the windows, surveying the area. I'm just sitting there hoping that Caleb will hurry up and come and rescue us. Suddenly, I hear somebody whine, "Oh my god," and then crying. Kathy snaps her head to where Meh is looking and gasps. I look to where they're facing. I see nothing. But then, I hear through a small opening in the windows that same weird swish sound from earlier. Meh ducks down, as though doing so will make her invisible, and Kathy hides her head behind the steering wheel. I follow lead and hunch down in my seat, but the noise comes straight up to the window. I can almost make out the silhouette of a tall, skinny man. And then, he presses his face up against Mare's window. I finally see him. Nobody screams. You'd think that we would, but it didn't happen. We all just stare at each other. He looks in at us for a while until Kathy switches her brights on, hoping that he's gonna run away. It did nothing. The dude literally just walked in front of the car and stood in front of the headlights. Maybe he thought that he could block us from leaving? I don't know. I couldn't make out his features very well, but the guy had to have been on something, and he was somewhere over 6 feet tall, no older than 30. He had the face of an average Joe. Nothing special. Nothing really sinister or particularly scary. Now, he had dark shaved hair, a weird expression on his face, pale skin and long face. Mare said that he had light coloured eyes and stubble with eyebrows that made him look like he was always concerned. There was no way I could make that out though. I have to take her word for it. What's really weird is that it's like 80 degrees and this guy is wearing corduroys and an oversized sweater with abnormally long sleeves. The sleeves went over his hands and would flop back and forth, just in front of the Geo. I'm not sure how long he was in front of the car for, but then he does something really bizarre. He bends his arms up towards his face, which I can only describe as looking like a praying mantis, because of the way his sleeves were hanging. He begins making circles around the car in a weird rhythm, taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back like Willy Wonka, but at no speed or anything. This is where I noticed the swish sound, exactly like what I'd heard up the trees. He was doing the 2 steps forward and 1 back in the woods. He was going after me, but he couldn't do it normally. There was definitely something wrong with him. By now, Mare was sobbing and Kathy seemed like she had to vomit, so I felt like I had to be the brave one. I looked at the slight space in the open window, and when he orbited his way over there, I said, "Hey, stop it, you're freaking us out." He heard me. He halted, looked back over at the car, straight at me. I said very firmly, "Leave," and he took an extended pause, smiled, and Willy Wonkaed his way out of vision into the darkness. After a while, Kathy said he disappeared into the woods, and Mare was like, "I can't believe this worked." We awkwardly laughed about what a weirdo he was, and he left and whatever. And we went to go back to waiting for Caleb, somewhat reassured, still paranoid. But then, after some time, Kathy said, "Oh, he's back." I couldn't see, but apparently, he was doing the 2 steps forward, 1 step back parallel to us on the other side of the road. And this time, he had a big branch in his hand. Mare got scared again. I held her hand so she'd feel better about it, even though I was ready to crap myself. It was awful, because I didn't know if he was coming towards us or moving away or what the hell he was up to. It was kind of like when you know there's going to be a jump scare in a horror movie. I heard the swishy sound back towards the Geo, on my window. He smacks it with a tree branch. Mare and I panic. I scoot as close to her as possible. They see the dude back up into the woods, then come running back and slamming the branch back into my window. It's like he's jousting with no horse. Thankfully, the window didn't break, but we just kept on getting the swishing sound followed by a clonk, which he did in a repetitive manner. Kathy perks up in her seat and starts pointing at the road ahead. I see headlights. She blares a horn and flashes the lights. Lo and behold, it's our saviour, Khalib. He brought his older brother, Alex. They both get out of his car and head over to us. Now Khalib and Alex are both tall guys. Walking around with them was like walking around with high elves. I felt very safe. Khalib is 6'8", Alex is 6'5". So I thought 2 taller dudes would scare him, but nope. Khalib walks towards him, trying to assess the situation. Alex comes over to the car and taps on the window, tells Kathy to get out. She does, and he walks her over to his car. Then he comes back to put the car in neutral so he can push it off the side of the road. Mare and I slowly get out. Mare makes a bolt for her brother's car. I help Alex push the car to the side of the road while Khalib tries to distract the guy, holding the end of his stick, telling him to go away. The guy yanks a branch away from Khalib, starts backing up by going 2 steps backwards and 1 forward. He eventually disappears down the street. I can't see him, Khalib can. The dude backs up pretty far and then laughs at Khalib, who sprints the other way down the road because the stick could have really hurt him. He then bumps past Alex, who had already got out of the Geo and was opening his car door, leaving me behind and the Geo alone. The guy apparently changed directions and aimed the stick at me. I really couldn't tell. I just heard everybody shout, "Elizabeth." This startles me. I jump to the side of the Geo, hearing this guy smashing his stick into the back window and a loud thud, then the swish sound. I take the long way round the car, sprinting off into the road, and feel Khalib grab my arm and tug me over to Alex's car. I feel as though all the wind and life has been knocked out of me. Khalib manages to shove me into the back seat and scrambles into the passenger side. By now, we are all safely in the car, and the weird guy is standing in his mantis position in front of the headlights again. He's abandoned the stick and just stood there with no intention to move. Alex puts the car into reverse and slams on gas, making me knock my head against the door. Then makes the sloppiest U-turn ever and nearly drives us into the woods, but gets us back to the road. Everybody was in what the hell mode as Alex tore away, far over whatever the limit is. Matt and Kathy saw the weird guy chasing behind us, just before Alex made the U-turn. The next day, I went back there with Khalib, Kathy, and the dude from the tow truck place. There was no sign of him. As we approached the Geo, we saw that, in the space where the window was, there were all my cigarettes. The box was missing, but they were neatly jammed in a row along the window space. I have no doubt it was courtesy of this weird guy. To this day, I wonder if he knew I was up in the tree and took them, or if he thought that I dropped them further into the woods and was looking for me, or if he found them and decided to put them there because he was so weird. I still wonder what his intentions were. I have so many unanswered questions.